You mentioned in your first question that a lot of people, aren't going to get the help they need because of different financial crises, or it's just never been in them. It's just not a lot of black culture, just not to go to the doctor. So, which kind of leads me to my next question, which is, how do you think that, you talked about how it affects the church, in your opinion, how do you feel that it affects the community, the black community as a whole?
I think it leaves us in worse shape, because what happens is these issues are taking place, but we don't know how to address them. So what they do is they go underground and they come out sideways, as many things do in our lives. When you don't deal with them straight on, head on, then they come out in a different way. So our community sees these issues. It doesn't mean that we don't have any resources, because spiritually and holistically, we have some resources left from where we came from, to put our arms around people, to try to care for them. The church does a great job of that. But there are certain aspects of mental illness that will not get addressed. And you end up with people in situations that could be better off could they use the resources that are going on, that are available, but they don't know it. So they don't know how to follow the path, how to pursue the path.
Right.
So I think our community is worse off. We need those resources to be added to. It's not an either or, but it's a both and. I teach that it's a both and. We need God, but we also need these other resources, and we need to marry them, that coalesce together, so that we can get all of that we can to help our community.
Right. You mentioned that the church and the Bible take a spiritual and holistic approach to dealing with mental health issues and issues, period, whereas society takes a scientific approach. Now, which one do you think is better? Or how do you think that works? Or how do they meet in the middle?
Well, that's a good question. And I don't think y'all got that much time, but we'll work on it anyway. Science, it is a myth. It's a myth. When I use the word myth, I'm not talking about the word myth that describes something that's not true,
yes,
but myth of a holistic idea about what reality is all about. And so if you go back into the pre-modern world, the myth of society is the Bible. The Bible is the myth, and God is the myth. It's the big story of what reality is all about. When you get to about the late 1800s and you get into the Enlightenment and this Greek orientation, science becomes the myth. We explain life in terms of science and scientific terms, yeah, not in terms of God, which begins to put them at odds against one another early on, until today people are like, if you're talking science, you can't be talking God, and if you're talking God, you can't be talking science, yeah, which the same God who created the world is the same God who spoke the word. So there can't be any, it's impossible for there to be any incongruence between them. The incongruence is those in the scientific world do not know the word, or those in the word world don't understand science, or both and they don't know how to coalesce them. Right. So I often bring them together, and we have partnerships with people like Summa Hospital to coalesce, to bring together what God has created. If God created us and he spoke the word, they got to be the same. They're coming from the same being.
Right.
But how do we do that? How do you bring them together? How do you cause them to work together? So science often is put in contradiction to God, and it causes us it makes it difficult to deal with a problem like mental illness, because I'm just going to pray about it.
Right.
Okay, well, that's good. I want you to pray about it. But also we might need to deal with some of these elements over here that are contributing to it.
Right.
And so we need to bring them together, and it's very difficult.
Right. So what it sounds like is we're saying that, of course, that we have the spiritual part, we have the holistic part, but we need to also add in the scientific. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. And I wouldn't say it exactly like that, although I love the way you're talking. I would probably say we have much more affinity to the spiritual. I'm not sure we understand that totally, or we have a handle on it, but at least that's where we live.
Right.
When we start talking about scientific stuff, it becomes much more difficult. Quick example to help people understand. When the Bible begins to say, what happened in the beginning, well, we want to make this a scientific treatise. So God created the world in 7 days, and it's not a scientific treatise. It is a big picture of reality of how God you chose to explain to people 4, 5, 6,000 years ago how creation took place. It's got nothing to do with science. Science wasn't created, didn't come into being until the late 1800s.
Right.
So it's not scientific.
Right.
It doesn't mean that it's anti-scientific, it's just that's not their view. Their view is religious,
Right.
and cultural, not scientific.
Right.
Well, we need to put the two together. Well, people are arguing and denominations are coming apart about whether it is 7 literal days, 7,000 years, or they're trying to measure the scientific accuracy of words that were never intended to be scientific. So that's part of the issue.
Wow.